Turn to Proverbs 1 and verse 16. We're still in this section of Proverbs chapter 1 where Solomon is warning his son about these wicked people who would try to entice him to come join with them and to rob and kill people and to share everything commonly between them, share the spoil. It says there in verse 16, "For their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood." Now, if you remember back in verse 11, I talked about how these men here that are described in this section of Proverbs 1 are reprobates, and we know that from this verse in Proverbs 1:16 because this is quoted in Romans 3:15, which we did go to before, and I'll take you there again briefly, and then we're also going to go down a little bit and look at another verse there in Romans 3 a little bit later. In Romans 3:15, Paul here is quoting from this verse, and there's another one very similar to it, both of which are he could be quoting from here. In verse 13, Romans 3:13, it says, "Their throat is an open sepulchre, with their tongues they have used deceit, the poison of the asps under their lips." I wanted verse 15. "Their feet are swift to shed blood." And he's talking about here Jews and Gentiles all under sin. So he's talking about man by nature in his wicked state. His feet are swift to shed blood, just like this says. "Their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood." So if you look then in verse 11 of Romans 3, we find out another characteristic of these wicked people, and this is going to shed a little bit of light on why Solomon tells his son to interact or not interact with these men in a particular way. In Romans 3:11, speaking of these same wicked men, he says, there is none that understandeth, there is none that seeketh after God." So in that these men have no understanding by nature, then it would be vain to try to reason with them to get them to repent of their evil ways by appealing to their understanding, which they don't have. And then, so this makes perfect sense then when we look at verse 15, which was what we looked at last week, where he says, "My son, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path," Proverbs 1:15. So he doesn't say, "My son, try to talk them out of it, try to be a good influence with them, be friendly with them for a while and see if you can't let your goodness rub off on them." He didn't say that. He just said, stay away from them, steer clear of them, because these men have no understanding and they are not going to be admonished. And this is just a good principle that we should remember, to never walk with wicked people with hopes of convincing them to change, right? Now, if you have sinners who are repentant and they've shown signs that the Lord has changed their heart or something, and maybe they're still in their sins, but they are interested to learn or something, that's a different story. Because Jesus hung out with the publicans and the harlots. But he didn't hang out with unrepentant publicans and harlots, right? And people will use this excuse to go, "Oh, it's okay to go to the bar and hang out with the worldly people there, maybe I'll convert them." No, Jesus didn't go to the bar to drink with people. He didn't go to the whorehouse. He hung out with repentant sinners. There's a big difference there.
He didn't go searching for them either. They came searching for him.
Exactly. So when a sinner comes across your path and they are showing some type of contrition in their heart, some evidence of that the Lord's changed them, and they're looking for answers, yeah, by all means, talk to them, help them out. But don't think that we're going to just go buddy up with wicked people and change their nature or something. And certainly don't think that your children are going to do that to other bad kids out there either, because that's not going to happen. If we look in Psalm 1 and verse 1, Psalm 1:1, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful." So we don't want to be walking, standing, or sitting with sinners, unrepentant sinners, that is. Look in Proverbs 22, 24 through 25. Who we make our friends and who we spend our time with has consequences. It will end up having an impact on us. Could be for good, could be for evil. In this case, when you find people like Solomon's talking about here, steer clear. Proverbs 22, 24 through 25. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go. And here's the reason. Lest thou learn his ways, and get a snare to thy soul. Notice what he didn't say there. Make friendship with an angry man and go with a furious man so that he can learn your ways, right? And then save his soul. That's not what it says. It says stay away from that guy because it's going to be a snare to your soul. You are going to end up being harmed and he's going to rub off on you and not the other way around. I've said it before, but you don't try to clean up a mud puddle by taking a shower and then bathing in it and hopefully your cleanness will rub off on it or something. That doesn't work. And especially when we're dealing with, there's sinners and then there's sinners. When we're talking about people that are conspiring to murder and kill people, to steal their stuff, that's a different class of sinner. And so to try to change the mind of somebody like that is not going to work because these people have a heart of stone and only the sovereign grace of God could change that heart. And it takes a legitimate operation, a heart operation from God to turn like a Saul of Tarsus into Apostle Paul, right? Or a King Manasseh, turn his heart into something quite different. We are not going to do that. Only God can do something like that. And if we try to, we are going to end up destroying ourselves. Proverbs 13 and verse 20. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. And I'd say as your children are, when they're young, but especially as they get towards adolescence, it'd be really important to try to instill this principle in them, that a companion of fools will be destroyed. Because I think about my childhood and how I was corrupted, and I not that I was some perfect angel, but if I wouldn't have hung out with the kids that I hung out with, my childhood or my adolescence would have been a lot different, I'm sure, because I wasn't raised that way, and I would have been a lot better off. Those guys had a very bad impact on me, and then through learning their ways, I'm sure I had a bad impact on a lot of other people. That's how it's a slippery slope there. It cascades. So I think that's something very important to instill in your children. Now let's look at this verse here from another angle. Let's read it again. Proverbs 1:16. I want to draw your attention here to a couple of words in the verse. For their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. Notice that they're running and making haste to sin. And I say, oh, that saints were as motivated to do righteousness as sinners are to do evil. As you think about the motivation of sinners, especially some sinners, they are very diligent people. And they will go after whatever they want, and nothing is going to stop them. And they're going to work hard at it, and they're going to press forward, and they're going to get whatever they want. That guy that wants his neighbor's wife is going to keep on trying, and he's going to think about ways that he can seduce her, and lay awake at night doing it. Sadly, I know of used to be an ordained minister that did that very thing. Took his best friend's wife and plotted and schemed for a long time and worked on her for a long time until he finally got her. Makes me wonder about the spiritual state of such a man that would do something like that. But they run to evil. They make haste to shed blood. They don't waste any time going after their sin. The Christian life, we often refer to it as a walk. I think sometimes we've seen a lot of this out there in what is called Christianity, and sometimes we probably, if we would be introspective, we'd see it in our own lives, that it's more of a crawl. Right? The wicked run. We're supposed to be walking, and sometimes we're on our hands and knees crawling around if we're not sliding backwards. And that's the continual battle of being a Christian. And we all fight that one. It says there, the wicked, they don't sleep. I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit, but it says in Proverbs 4:16 that they sleep not except they've done mischief, and their sleep is taken away unless they cause some to fall. So these guys, they're not gonna be wasting their time having a nice restful repose until they have figured out a way to accomplish whatever their sin they want to do is. But God's children are too often busy sleeping instead of watching, right? Isn't that what the Lord told Peter in Mark 14 and verse 37? The wicked, they're running, they're making haste, and sometimes we end up being spiritual sluggards, and the wicked are laying awake, they're not getting any sleep, and we're just off in our blissful, stupor, not even paying attention to what's going on in our lives. Mark 14 and verse 37. Jesus says, or it says there, and he cometh. This is speaking of Jesus whenever he had his 3 disciples with him there in the garden. He told them to watch and pray. Well, he went and prayed. It says, and he cometh and findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Couldest thou not watch 1 hour? Now chances are, if Peter was like we are, if there would have been a good football game on or something that would have piqued Peter's interest, he probably wouldn't have been sleeping for an hour. He could easily watch the football game for an hour or easily done whatever was his interest, right? But when it comes to something that is probably one of the most spiritual things we can do, and that's talking to God, we fall asleep. We've all done it, right? It's funny. It seems like sometimes the more spiritual a thing is, the harder it is to do it and to keep your mind focused. How hard is it to keep your mind focused when you're reading the Bible sometimes? When you're praying and your mind's just, we're all wandering all over the place. That's our condition. I'm not sure why the Lord set it up this way, but he has, that the children of this world are wiser in their generation than the children of light. Luke 16 and verse 8. Because when you think about it, how many companies, how many major successful companies do you know that have been started by Bible-believing Christians? Not very many. I can think of Chick-fil-A, Hobby Lobby. I think Panera Bread is actually owned by Christian people. I saw in a little plaque in the entryway of one of their stores one time, one of the restaurants. But not very many, though. The majority of the companies and corporations, the majority of the politicians, although they all profess to be Christians, right? But the majority of the movers and shakers in this world are not Bible-believing Christians, right? They are the men of this world, and that's what their propensity is. And I think a lot of times just the rest of us are probably just more concerned about going to church, taking care of our families, trying to raise our kids, read our Bibles, just live a Christian life, and we don't have aspirations of greatness and trying to get rich and making that the main focus in our lives. That might have something to do with it. But anyway, Luke 16 and verse 8. It says, and the Lord commended the unjust servant because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. This is the guy that was, yeah.
You said about most of the owners of businesses in this world being men of the world. The world teaches that you need to be great and instills it in people to try to do things like that. But if you're a Bible-believing Christian, you know that you don't need to stress out about being great. You need to be good.
That's right. That's right. And he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. God will take care of the greatness.
Being good is more important.
Yes, that's right. I just read a quote from Matthew Henry just today, and he said something about those that follow after honor. It's like honor's like a shadow. Those that follow after it, it keeps moving away from them, and those that try to move away from it, it follows them. So you think about that. If you try to attain unto honor, you're not going to do it, right? But if you are humble and you don't want the attention, you don't want the promotion, then it comes to you. It follows you. I thought that was pretty good. These sinners that we're looking at here, like in Proverbs chapter 1, these guys are diligent, deep thinkers, and their studiousness sometimes would put Christians to shame. Look at Proverbs 24 and verse 2. You got to hand it to the people of this world. They're pretty impressive people. They can get things done. They attain to power and influence. And there's a reason for that. Proverbs 24 and verse 2. For their heart studieth destruction, and their lips talk of mischief. There are people actually that do that. They study destruction. Some of these guys think about the people that plan these awfully destructive wars. And they know full well this isn't about national security or something. They're just doing it for whatever, money, power, whatever it is. But anyway, they studieth destruction, their lips talk of mischief. There's people out there like that, unfortunately. Look at Psalm 64, 5 through 6. Like you go to college and you study Marxism. That's studying destruction. That's how societies and countries and peoples are destroyed. Psalm 64, 5 through 6. It says, they encourage themselves in an evil matter. They commune of laying snares privily. It's just like the guys we're looking at in Proverbs 1. They say, who shall see them? They search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search. Both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. Deep thinkers, searching it out diligently, studying it. They'd put us to shame. They study destruction a lot, probably more diligently than we study our Bibles. You think about that. So just as a sluggard should go to the ant and consider her ways and be wise, like we're told in Proverbs 6:6, so should the Christian take note of the ways of sinners and imitate their diligence, but not their devices. See, we can learn from them, we can look at the way they do things, and we can imitate diligence, but we don't imitate what their aim of their diligence is, but we can imitate how they go about working hard for something. Let's look at just a couple of verses where the Bible exhorts us to do what these guys do. Remember, they run to do, how do you say it there in Proverbs 1? They run to evil, make haste to shed blood. Well, we're told the same thing. We're told that we should be running a race. Hebrews 12 and verse 1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay wait. Let us lay wait. I got the Proverbs verse in my head. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. So set aside the evil, right, and then run the race that Christ would have us to run. So we talk about the Christian walk, but maybe we should call it the Christian run. But the Bible does say we ought so to walk, but we're supposed to run too. And we're supposed to stand. So, there's a time to stand fast, there's a time to walk, and there's a time to run. All of those things are incumbent upon us. Look at 1 Corinthians 9:26. Paul was a guy who was a runner. He labored more abundantly than they all, he said. 1 Corinthians 9:26. He says, I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. So he knew where he was going. He had that finish line in sight, not running as uncertainly, not just running somewhere, and not just swinging at the air, but fighting the good fight. And that's what he said in 2 Timothy. I've fought a good fight, I've finished my course, I've kept the faith. That's what we should be aspiring to. I'll give you one more, and then we'll move on to Proverbs 1:17. Look at Psalm 119 and verse 60. So learn from the wicked. They lay awake at night, planning and scheming. Well, we're supposed to be not sleeping but watching, right? They run to do evil. We should be running the race that's set before us, right? We should be doing how they do it, only with a different aim in mind. Psalm 119 and verse 60. I made haste. Isn't that what it said? They make haste to shed blood. I made haste and delayed not to keep thy commandments. Run that race, make haste to keep the commandments. That takes care of Proverbs 1:16.